Right now, there could be a vote under the Gold Dome on Governor Kemp's top item this legislative session, tort reform. We're going to take a deeper look at this and how it impacts Georgia business. Also, the Fed holds rates, but concern over stagflation may be creeping back into our economy. We got a financial expert today that's going to help calm the nerves. And 2 American astronauts are back on Earth after roughly 9 months in space. We brought in a local professor who's working to understand how the human body works away from gravity for long periods of time. This is The Take. Let's get it. Hello and welcome. I'm Chesley McNeil, and this is The Take, where we go above and beyond the headlines and look at the why and how stories are impacting you and your community. We invite experts in to give their expertise and takes on today's top stories, and we try to have a little bit of fun as well. Well, today may be the day that we see the State House vote on an effort to limit lawsuits and large jury verdicts. The measure, commonly being referred to as tort reform, passed out of the House committee rules on Tuesday. It allows separate trials for assessing responsibility and determining damages. It also tries to make sure defendants can get a baseline case dismissed before engaging in an expensive pre-trial preparation. Here to talk more about that and its impact on Georgia business is Chris Arnone. He is joining us he's a partner with and vice chair of Moore and Colson. Good morning to you, Chris. Welcome to the show. Can you hear me, Chris? I don't know if Chris can actually.
Morning.
Oh, okay. There you go. There you go. Talk to me about tort reform and what it means to you. Can you hear me, Chris? I think we're having some. All right, so we're having some problems with Chris's audio. I'm not sure that he'll be able to hear me. We try to fix that problem and get back to him. All right, other stories that we're tracking on this Thursday. Today, students and family of Campbell High School are planning to pack a local school board meeting to show their support for 2 longtime coaches who were ousted with no warning. Randy McClure and James Gwynn tell 11Alive they were informed by the district that they didn't have roles for them for next year and were not told why. That meeting will take place tonight at 6 p.m. A visitation will be held today for Westminster coach and teacher Gary Jones. His body was recovered on Lake Oconee after a month-long search. Jones went missing in early February after he and his fiancée Jocelyn Wilson were celebrating his 50th birthday on the lake. The couple's death appears to be an accidental drowning. Starting on April 2nd, MARTA will temporarily close the bus loop at Indian Creek Station for 6 weeks, or the station's improvements. Bus and rail services will remain the same. The loop will be barricaded for safety, but the fare gates and the elevators will remain open. All right, let's take a look at our forecast for today, and we are looking at, well, the first day of spring. Believe it or not, it's not feeling very springy, right? We are looking at our temperatures dropping. We started out in the 60s this morning, and now we're falling through the 50s, and I think that's where we're going to stay for the rest of the afternoon. To go along with the 50-degree temperatures will be the winds. Winds gusting up to 25 to 30 miles per hour will make it feel mighty cold outside. You see that raindrop right there and a 40% chance. We've seen that pass by. Now a 20% chance for an isolated shower or two will remain through the afternoon. We'll get some sunshine back in here for our Friday. 65 degrees will be the afternoon high temperature. 70s return as we head into the weekend, so that cold air is really short-lived. We'll get back to feeling more like spring on Saturday and Sunday. Temperatures on Sunday climbing up to 76 degrees. Another system will come through on Monday. Will bring us the rain Monday morning. We're looking at 68 degrees for the afternoon high temperature. So we dip down just a little bit. Keep in mind the mid to upper 60s is where we should be for this time of year. We'll stay there for your Tuesday and then back to the 70s as we head into the middle of next week. We're back right after this. All right, welcome back to the show. We have Chris Arnone here with me. And Chris, can you hear me now?
Yes, good morning, Chester. How are you?
Good to see you, man. Thanks for being on the show with us. We were talking about tort reform, and maybe a lot of people don't understand what's all involved with tort reform. Break it down for us if you could.
Yeah, basically what this bill that's been proposed is going to change is really 3 things. It would be first how businesses can have a lawsuit. Second would be how lawyers can argue a lawsuit, and then third would be how damages would be awarded in a lawsuit. So it's going to be a pretty significant change if it's passed.
What would be the impacts on businesses? Maybe what's the direct connection should this measure pass?
Yeah, right now Georgia is known as one of the best, if not the best, business-friendly states, with the exception right now of the insurance area. It's considered really a judicial hellhole right now. As we work with middle market and closely held businesses here at our firm, they're faced with significant rising insurance costs. So the idea behind this bill is to level the playing field a little bit in that area, give businesses some more avenues to defend themselves but still providing some, reasonable awards and avenues for those that have been injured. So really to curb insurance costs, that's really the hope here.
If passed, would it have a wide reach, you think?
It absolutely would. And if you look at the key industries in Georgia, if you think of the Savannah port, trucking and transportation, you think at retail, medical, the medical community, convenience stores, and even farming in Georgia, those are all industries that have been facing a significant rise in insurance costs. So it would be a pretty widespread impact if it's passed.
This legislative session, this has been the big thing, tort reform. We've been hearing about it. Why do you think the governor's putting so much behind this?
Well, I think a couple things. They've tried to have some reform for several years now, and they haven't been able to get any movement. So I think he's really put his foot down here. He realizes that this is a significant issue. It's estimated to be as much as a $15 billion impact on the state. A recent study suggested that Georgia residents pay as much of it as a $2,000 insurance tax, meaning that the insurance costs we pay are that much more than other states. So he realizes that while there's a lot of good things happening in Georgia, this is an area that needs improvement.
All right, we'll see what happens today. Chris Arnone, thanks for joining us this morning and giving us your insight. Really appreciate you.
Sure thing. Thank you.
All right. Despite constitutional limitations, President Trump will try to deliver a death blow to a key federal agency today. Joining us now is NBC Washington correspondent Alice Barr to give us more on this. And the president has been talking about doing this for a while, even while he was on the campaign trail, Alice. And but nearly 90% of the funding is at the state level and the local level. What do you think is going to happen here?
Right. So it's important to have that context, Chesley, when we talk about closing the Department of Education. It's actually one of the smallest federal agencies already. And last week we saw half the staff was cut. And now this new executive order that President Trump is set to sign later today is aimed at shutting it down entirely. Now, in order to completely close a federal agency, federal department, Congress would have to sign on. And that does not appear likely. But what the Trump administration can do is to really just fully gut the agency to the point where it can't really operate. That's kind of what we saw with USAID, the foreign aid group that's been essentially shuttered. So starting with your first note there, that 90% of funding for schools already happens at the state and local level. There's 10% that comes from the federal government. And that 10% goes for some really important things. It's aimed at protecting students with disabilities, investigating discrimination claims, helping low-income school districts, and managing higher ed financial aid. And Secretary of Education Linda McMahon has said that those core functions are going to continue because the idea is to shift all of the oversight to the states. So in some capacity, the idea is that the states would then be responsible for each of those core functions that is required under federal statute, under federal law, that those things continue. The mechanics of that, though, are unclear. And I've actually spoken with a mother of a child with disabilities who's very concerned about how this is all going to operate and whether the services that her child needs and other children need might suffer.
So does the White House offer any gaps in between if they start stripping down, or is that really up to the local entities to do that?
Right. So at this point, when we saw half the staff cut last week, there were, a number of staffers that remained that were going to be responsible for filling all those key roles that I just mentioned, fulfilling those important missions. Of course, it gets harder the fewer people you have, and the fewer and fewer, it gets harder and harder. So the overall impetus and the intention on the Trump administration's department is that the states would pick up all of the slack really, if this department is entirely shut down, which is what they're claiming is their intention. But the mechanics, again, it's not clear how all of that would work and whether maybe in the interim people would remain at the federal level to make sure that this funding is getting to low-income school districts, that, you know, the services that disabled kids need in order to learn in a classroom alongside normally able children, that all continues.
All right, quickly, let's talk about the Trump administration weighing a new step in immigration. Give us the details on that.
Right. So this is uncharted territory. The Trump administration is considering, according to 3 defense officials to NBC News, considering options to potentially create a southern border buffer zone. This would be in New Mexico that could include U.S. troops temporarily holding migrants who cross into the country. And NBC News has been told that these discussions are ongoing, but nothing has yet been approved. So it's unclear how far down the line this would be. But having American troops involved in actually detaining migrants, however that might look, that would certainly be a new step.
All right, Alice Barr, I really appreciate your insight. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you again tomorrow. All right, the Federal Reserve staying cautious and holding interest rates steady, remaining about 4.5%. Analysts say Wednesday's decision shows central bankers are waiting to see how the Trump administration policy will have an impact on the U.S. economy. Even though inflation is holding around 2.5% or 2.8%, most consumers see inflation as cumulative, stretching back to the pandemic. It was a point not lost on Fed Chairman Jerome Powell.
The grocery bill is about past inflation, really. There was inflation in 21, 2, and 3, and prices went up. The current level, it's not the change in prices. It's they're unhappy, and they're not wrong to be unhappy that prices went up quite a bit, and they're paying a lot for those things.
All this has one word starting to creep back into our lives for the first time in roughly half a century: stagflation. Here to make sense of it all is Atlanta-based financial expert Andrew Poulos. Good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you, Chesley. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Let's start off with stagflation. What is that?
It's a word we haven't heard in a long time, but essentially stagflation is not good. That could potentially tell us that we're headed to an economy where rising inflation is getting worse, economic growth is slowing down or becomes stagnant, and of course unemployment begins to rise. So the combination of those 3 just would not be good economically.
How real would you say this concern should be?
I think it's a real concern. Obviously, you can see that the Fed refuses to lower rates. I shouldn't say refuses, but essentially is very, very cautious. In December, there was one Fed president that said there would be no rate cuts in 2025. Now, as of yesterday's meeting, if you look at the minutes of the meeting, there's 4 Fed presidents that don't see a rate cut in 2025, even though Fed Chairman Powell said that they still see 2 rate cuts on the table. So I think they're just being very cautious because they don't want inflation to creep back up. But of course, we're also starting to see unemployment. We're starting to see large employers and small businesses take hits, and unemployment is going to begin to rise.
Listening to the Fed chair yesterday, did he give any comments that may have tipped his hand into which way he may be headed?
Well, based on the market sentiment yesterday, you can see after the Fed chairman spoke, the market rallied to end the day. This morning, futures are down, so we're going to see how it's going to work out today. But essentially, the market sort of is taking the tip that 2 rate cuts are coming, and if economic growth slows down, that the Fed will be forced to do possibly more than 2 rate cuts. Of course, again, the Fed's you can just tell based on his words, he's being very cautious. They don't want to start cutting rates more prematurely and have inflation go through the roof again.
Here in Metro Atlanta, what kind of signs should we be looking for to see how we should manage our pocketbooks, do you think?
Look, as a consumer, you got to be very cautious. You got to manage your money well. You need to have 3 to 6 months of an emergency savings fund. You got to be able to manage for yourself, because if we do hit rocky times, unemployment begins to rise, inflation continues to go higher, and growth slows down, which is apparently what is looking like it's happening right now. We may get into some bumpy times the second half of 2025 and certainly beginning of 26.
Gotcha. You know, going back to Washington today marks 2 months that President Trump has been in office for his 2nd term. How do you think the relationship between he and the Feds have been? Any bad blood between the president and the Fed chair?
That's a great question, Chesley. Well, I think part of what the strategy is with tariffs for President Trump is to bring down and use tariffs essentially to slow down the economy, to force the Fed to cut rates. Obviously, that's, you know, anyone who can read between the lines can read that the White House, that is their focus right now, is to get the Federal Reserve to cut rates, which they are very stubborn to do. And so I think there's a clash there. Some of it is politics, but we're going to see how it's going to play out probably in the next couple of months.
It's getting into everything, you know. Politics is getting into everything, man. Even car buying, right? You know. So you may know this, may not know this. When is the next Fed meeting, and by then could we expect the cuts to happen? Then, do you know?
I think, look, I'm going off memory. I think the next one's going to be in June, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
But I don't, based on what I read yesterday and what I'm seeing, I don't think really that the Fed is inclined to cut rates. If they do, probably until the September meeting. Again, anything can happen. Look, if we hit a rough patch over the next 2-3 months, between now and the next Fed meeting, and unemployment shoots up, and economic growth gets worse than what they're seeing right now, anticipating, the Fed can cut rates at any time, even as we've seen before historically. They could be in emergency rate cuts. I don't see that happening right now, but I'm sure the Fed is very cautious, and again, keeping a very close eye on the growth, the economic growth, which they even mentioned yesterday that they're starting to see coming down, and they've actually lowered their expectations for the year.
Let me ask you this, Andrew. What role does the White House play in this?
Look, Chesley, the White House sort of plays a big role because you can see President Trump came in. You can see what they call as President Trump 2.0 versus 1.0, first administration, second administration, first administration. President Trump was all about the markets, making sure the markets don't get spooked, don't get rocked. I mean, that was his daily focus, so to speak. Now it's, he really doesn't care about the market. It's as if he's trying to bring the markets down to create some volatility and pressure the Fed to cut rates. So I think the White House, with everything that they're doing, their ammunition is to create slow growth, increase unemployment, basically, and of course try to cause inflation to come down so the Fed can cut rates and create another boom in the economy. But look, is it going to play out like that? It's just too early to tell because President Trump's only been in the White House now for 2 months.
All right, there you go. Andrew Poulos, my friend of the show. Glad to see you. Always happy when I see your name pop up on the show there. And never seen a duplicate of the pocket square and the tie match yet. I haven't seen a duplicate, man. You got too many.
We're going shopping soon.
Appreciate you, man. Hey, think about me while you're going shopping too. Pick me up a couple, all right? Thanks a lot. Really appreciate it. Plenty more stories, folks, when we come back. This is The Take. All right, welcome back to the show. After 9 months in space, Commander Suni Williams and Captain Butch Wilmore are home safe and sound. Their SpaceX capsule landed safely off the coast of Florida Tuesday evening. Now the work begins to settle their bodies back to life on Earth, and that's something that Emory University has been studying for some time now. With more on this out-of-this-world research, Bill Dinan, a professor emeritus at Emory's Department of Radiation Oncology, joins us now. Welcome, Bill.
Hi, good to be here. Thanks.
All right, now you've been studying this, looking at astronauts' health and performance during long-term space missions. Talk to me about why this study was commissioned.
My specialty is hazards of space radiation. We know that there is some risk of elevated risk of cancer for people exposed to space radiation. We know that radiation is everywhere in space. But we do have some good news for these astronauts that have returned from the International Space Station. They really get a lot less radiation dose than astronauts would get on a journey, say, to Mars or living on a moon base, because they're in orbit close to the Earth. They're protected by the Earth's magnetic field, so their risk is going to be small. It's going to be sort of on the same order as from medical imaging. Right? It's not zero, but they're really going to be in pretty good shape. There are other aspects of the space environment that are harmful to health. The big one, of course, is what we call microgravity, altered gravitational field. Undoubtedly, they're adjusting now to being back on Earth and to feeling the effects of Earth gravity. One of the real triumphs of the space station program has been the opportunity to study the effects of gravity or loss of gravity, altered gravity, and also to develop countermeasures, which we've gotten a lot better about over the last years. An example of a countermeasure would be exercise, for example, to prevent muscle loss or bone loss in space.
When we look at the pictures, it doesn't look like a big space that they're in. You mentioned exercise, and then obviously the weightlessness, gravity. Which will they search them for first? Will they look at the radiation first, or will they look at the effects on gravity first when they first come back and they're checking them out?
Well, gravity's the big one.
Okay.
And there are other aspects, many other hazards in space. One of them is the closed environment.
Mm-hmm.
They do the best they can to maintain a good breathable atmosphere on the International Space Station, but it's not perfectly like Earth. So that's a big one that the space station has taught us how to regulate that environment. It must be, as you say, it's not a huge space. Mm-hmm. It is quite a bit bigger than what people envision for a trip to Mars, for example. It would be something like 3 years in a Winnebago. The International Space Station is bigger than that. But there is, psychologically, it must be interesting, must be difficult to be in this space with a lot of noisy machinery. You have the same roommates for 6 months. So, of course, NASA screens its astronauts very carefully to find people that are amenable to that kind of social situation.
Is it true that we grow older in space? We've been hearing that for a while. Is that true?
Well, we grow older everywhere, right?
Is it faster in space, I guess,
Yeah,
or is it slower in space?
There's interest in the idea that the higher doses of radiation that you might encounter in deep space, away from the Earth's protective magnetic field, might accelerate aging, that we might see the diseases of aging accelerated. But really, there's some work that you can do in animals, some suggestion of aging, but really we won't know until people go and we see what happens.
How long will it be, the last question for you, how long will it be before they get checked out that they get a chance to get back to their families and friends and that kind of thing? Is it a long-term testing or is it really short?
I think it's short nowadays. We have so much experience now with the readjustment to coming back to Earth. We have good countermeasures for the health effects that they'd see in space. So I don't think we've been told by NASA how long they'll be examined. And like anybody else, astronauts' medical information is private. But hopefully it won't be too long.
Yeah, especially being out there that long in space, I'm sure they want to get back to somewhat normalcy. Yeah, Bill, thanks so much. Yeah, Bill, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for your insight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
All right, take care. Don't go anywhere, folks. My final take when we come back after this break. All right, welcome to the first day of spring. Although it still feels like winter on the outside, temperatures will be falling through the 50s today. That wind out there is going to make it feel even cooler, folks. We'll rebound nicely, though, and quickly. 65 degrees will be the high temperature on Friday after a 35-degree start, so it's going to be very chilly in the morning at least. 70s will come back our way as we head into the weekend, and then our next best chance for rain comes back to us on Monday. I think it'll be around Monday morning. We'll be back into the 60s, and then the 70s will return by the middle of next week. All right, before we go, folks, my final take, and it's here. It's official. March Madness, and look who's back in the tournament. Your Georgia Bulldogs are dancing, folks. Too bad they pulled a partner named Gonzaga. That's going to be a tough fight, you know. This is only the 11th appearance in the NCAA tournament for Georgia, and the first time in 10 years. Gonzaga is almost a lock every year to make it into the tournament. Now here's some solace for you. Neither team has ever won the tournament championship. So could this be the year for the Dogs? Doubt it. There's some powerhouses out there like Florida, Duke, you know. It's a tough fight, but let's see. And maybe they'll make it. Go Dogs. Not in my bracket, though. We'll see you back here tomorrow.